This is my breakdown of New York Congressional District 13 for the election of Professor Brent Anderson. First, we're going to discuss the demographics of the district by age and sex, race and ethnicity, household income, and finally education. Then we're going to compare it to the typology groups that I believe best fall into the same categories as this district. And then we're going to discuss some campaign ideas for ads that we will be running. First, we're going to talk about age and sex in District 13. On the left-hand side, there's an age structure chart. The red line represents Congressional District 13, and the black line represents the whole state of New York. So you can see from right around age 20 up to about age 44, the red line is above the black line, meaning that there is more density in this district than there is in New York average of this age group. So these are the ones that we need to target the most in our campaign because they're the most populated in this area. On the right, you can see a detailed age and sex chart. And in the 25 through 29-year-old range, the men are slightly higher, just by a sliver, by 0.03%. And above that, the ladies lead just slightly. So they're relatively equal though, so I believe that we can target both genders in this race. On the race and ethnicity side, you can see that there's a bit of an upset. Normally in New York, the average is a lot more whites than any other minorities. So in this district, you can see that there's a significantly higher amount of Hispanic people than there normally is throughout New York as a whole. There's also more black people in New York District 13 than there is normally in New York. So we need to appeal mainly to minorities because that makes up the biggest population of this district. You can see in the chart on the left that there are 32.1% more Hispanic people in this district than in the state as a whole, and 14.4% more black people in this district. There's also 42.8% less white people in this district than there normally is. So that's a little bit interesting. There's just a small total of Asian people living in this district as well. This district is 4.7% Asian, and that's 3.5% less than the state average. So appealing mainly to Hispanic and black people is definitely going to be the way to go because they make up the highest population density in this district. Next, we'll talk about household income. So on the chart on the left, you can see household income distribution. The black line is New York as a whole, and the red line is Congressional District 13. So you can see again, right between $40,000 to $45,000 a year, down to right around the bottom, so 10,000 or less per year, the red line leads in front of the black line. So that means that the people in this district are lower income than the rest of the state, marginally, of course. Not certainly, but definitely more more lower or middle income people in this district than in the rest of the state. Average, anyway. Excuse me. The biggest spike you can see is down in that 10 to 15,000 a year range at 8.78% of the district. Finally, we'll talk about education. So you can see that this district has significantly less high school graduates than New York as a whole. This educational attainment chart that you can see on the top right-hand side of the slide, the light blue thick bar is the congressional district, and the small darker blue line is New York. And you can see that the blue thick bar signaling Congressional District 13 is almost double what the New York line is. So you can see that there is 26.5% of this district has no high school diploma, and that's 88.4% more people without high school education than the state average. So that's quite significant. 37.9% of people have a high school diploma, and that's 10.8%, excuse me, less than the state average. There's 35.5% with a higher education, so like a college degree or anything like that, and that's 18.1% less than the state average. So this district leads in uneducated people, so not high school educated, not high school graduates, but it has slightly less people than the state average that have graduate degrees from high school or a college. So that's a bit interesting. I've also added this educational attainment sex ratio. I just thought that that was kind of interesting how it's split the way it is. No high school diploma, a female is 4% more likely to not get a high school diploma in this district. But they're also 11% more likely than men to get a higher degree, and 13% of men are more likely than women to get a high school diploma. So I just thought that that was interesting statistics, because normally you see that females are more educated or more likely to graduate and have higher education than males. But in this district, they're 4% more likely to not graduate high school at all, and then 11% more likely to get a higher degree. So I just thought that that was kind of interesting, and I thought I'd add it. The main target groups that we need to target in this election are going to be the Democratic mainstays and the outsider leftists. As shown in the following slides, these typology groups are the best targets because they primarily fall into the same categories as New York District 3. They have very similar statistics in that sense. First, we'll talk about them by age. 84% of the outsider left and 44% of the Democratic mainstays are between ages 18 to 49. This is consistent with the district because about 50.4% of the district is between 18 and 49 years old. The most density of that, of course, as I said earlier, is in the 25 through 29 range at 10.3% of the total district. You can see in this chart on the bottom, the lightest color is 18 through 29. The slightly darker one is 30 to 49, and the darkest gray is 50 to 64, and that green is the 65 plus. So you can see the outsider left is a younger typology group than the Democratic mainstays, and the Democratic mainstays are much more spread out, a lot more even, with the least amount in the 18 to 29 range. Next, we're going to talk about the two groups by race and ethnicity. So while these groups are primarily white, they also have the highest combined percentages of Hispanic people and Black people, which is consistent with our district because our district is highly populated by Black people and Hispanic people. So there's 15% of the outsider left and 26% of the Democratic mainstays that are Black, and 20% of both groups, respectively, are Hispanic, and 79.4% of District 13 is either Black or Hispanic, so that's consistent there. Next, we'll talk about the Democratic mainstays and outsider left by household income. This is a very important one. 41% of the outsider left and 36% of Democratic mainstays are low income. So you can see that on this chart down on the bottom, that lightest color is your low income. 41% of outsider left and 45% of Democratic mainstays are middle income, while 59.7% of District 13 makes $50,000 or less per year, thus falling into low and middle income. And as I said earlier, that highest density was right down in the 10 to 15K a year range, which is considered low income. So that is consistent with the demographics of our district that we are working. Next, we're going to talk about the Democratic mainstays and outsider leftists by education. So this group mainly has high school education and some college. So 29% of outsider left and 42% of Democratic mainstays have a high school education or less. 36% of outsider left and 32% of Democratic mainstays have some college experience, but no degree. 21% of outsider left and 14% of Democratic mainstays have a college degree, which is consistent with our district because our district is mainly uneducated. Most of them have like a high school degree or less. Some of them don't have a high school degree, but there is a margin that is, excuse me, college educated. So you see that this is consistent with our district. And finally, we're going to talk about our ad ideas. So I think the first portion of the ad needs to be this photo, a picture of a black man and a white man shaking hands. And I think we need to say that as a strong supporter of equality, Professor Brent Anderson will settle for nothing but complete equality for all. I think this is going to entice all of the minority voters in this district to vote for Brent because he'll make sure that they have equal rights and no wage gaps or anything like that, which is great. So Democratic mainstays also agree with this statement because that's just how they are. They believe that racial inequality is a huge problem in America and we need to solve that. So up to 78% believe this way, so I feel like this will entice their vote as well. The second portion of the ad, I believe, needs to say, Professor Anderson strongly believes that the government favors large corporations too much. Quote, the average person doesn't have a competitive chance against the industries, end quote. He vows to present legislation to fight big corporations' control of government funds. And of course, we'll have to have a video of Professor Anderson or just a voice line of Professor Anderson saying that for the actual ad because I can't just make up a random quote. But I believe that that would be a great quote to put in there, making it feel more authentic, you know what I mean? This is going to focus on the funding that many outsider leftists, 94% to be precise, believe that the government gives to big industries rather than the average person. So if we promise to reform that system, I think we'll get a lot of their votes, which would help greatly in our election. On the third slide, I think that we need to say that Professor Anderson strongly believes in fair and healthy wages. One of the first changes in policy he will push for is a raised minimum wage. The minimum wage right now is just so low. I believe it's like $12 and some change or something like that. And many, many Democratic mainstays, up to 85% of them, believe that that's just way too low to live on. So I think that if we promise to raise the minimum wage, of course we'll have to follow through. We can't make empty promises. But if we promise to raise the minimum wage, even just a little, it doesn't have to be a drastic raise. But I believe that if we say that we're going to raise the minimum wage, that is going to attract many new voters, hopefully people that may not have voted otherwise. So that would be great. And finally, the fourth part of our ad, I believe, needs to say, if elected, Professor Anderson will push harder than ever for free or reduced cost community college for high school graduates. I know all too well how pricey college can be. I vow to try as hard as I can to make it affordable to all. End quote. So I believe that that will entice a lot of people to vote because a lot of low-income families, which are densely populated in this area, can't afford to send their kids to college, you know? So if there's an option to get college paid for by the state, then a lot more people would be likely to go. And then a lot more people will be more highly educated, which is always good for society. 90% of outsider leftists also favor this idea. So this should entice them and probably get them to vote for you, which is the goal in this situation. All right, this was my presentation on how to work District 13 in New York for the election of Professor Anderson. Thank you for your attention. I had a lot of interesting discoveries while I made this. Very, very good. A lot of information that I found to be useful and informative and interesting, to be completely honest with you. I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming campaign and election, Professor Anderson. Thank you very much.